على رسوله الكريم, an Islamic response to Dajal's sexual revolution is our topic for this session. This is going to be my last presentation. After this is just a joint session with Sheikh Ali Mustafa. So we thank Allah for the opportunity we've got to be able to sit with you and share our thoughts with you, and who's given me sufficient energy so far to do the job I've been doing. The last people to come out to Dajjal will be women. Said the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And a man would have to return to his home and tie down, meaning coercively restrain his wife, sister, daughter to protect them from being seduced by Dajjal. This prophecy of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam points, in our opinion, to the feminist revolution which has been sweeping the world these last 150 years. The modern feminist revolution had its birth in an island which has expertise in spying and espionage, an island located about a month's journey by sea from the Arab world, an island from which came out a declaration in 1917 called the Balfour Declaration, which I mentioned in the last session, namely Britain. And from Britain, the feminist revolution went to the United States, and eventually we expect to see it move to Jerusalem. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, a day like a year, a day like a month, a day like a week. We say that this feminist revolution has Dajjal, as its author, its architect, its mastermind. Why? The Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, that women would dress like men. And we have explained in our lectures on an Islamic response to the modern feminist revolution that the reason why women would dress like men is because they want to assume the functional role of men in society. You are familiar with these views already. Allah did not create men and women with an equal sign between them. That is a wholly inadequate equation. No. You don't put an equal sign between the day and the night, do you? No. Allah created the male and the female the way He created the day and the night. He says so in Surah Al-Layl. The day and the night complement each other. They're not equal to each other. That's foolishness. Yes, between men and women there is spiritual equality. Between men and women there is moral equality in relation to Allah. In relation to Allah. But in relation to each other is something far more beautiful than an equal sign. The day and the night complement each other. Without the night, the day is meaningless. It's inadequate. It's going to be destructive if we have only daylight, nothing. The night without the day is also inadequate. It is only when day and night combine together that we have a meaningful whole. There's something beautiful to behold. They complement each other. They're interconnected, interrelated. They can't do without each other, the day and the night. Similarly, the male and the female. So Islam doesn't put an equal sign between men and women. No, we present to the world something far more beautiful than that. We say that the male and the female are complementary to each other. They are interconnected, they are interdependent. The world of men cannot survive without women. The world of women cannot survive without men. The two need each other, male and the female. But when Allah created the day, He gave to the day certain functions. And when He created the night, He gave the night certain functions. And when the day fulfilled those functions, and the night fulfilled those functions, then when the two came together, it was a harmonious union. It made sense. وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا, says Allah. We gave you the day for work and for toil, for struggle. And we gave you the night as something which covers and shrouds, something so mysterious, something so filled with splendor. Similarly with the men and the women. Allah gave to the man a biological constitution, a physical being, an emotional constitution for that physical being, to pursue the functions of the day, to work and to toil, to be the person who goes out there into the dunya and struggles in the dunya. And Allah gave to the woman a biological being, a physiological being, an emotional being which is different from the man, because she has a different function to perform. And when she fulfills her function and he fulfills his function, only then can you come together in something called sukoon. There are things in life that money cannot buy. Although there are some bankers who will dispute that. And one of the things in life that money cannot buy is sukoon. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. That amongst His signs is this, that He's created for you from amongst your very beings, your mates, your spouses, that you might come together and dwell with each other in a state of sukoon, peace and contentment and tranquility. There are things in life which money cannot buy, and sukoon is one of them. One of the functions of Dajjal is to try to deceive you. And the last people he's going to target to deceive them are women. And the deception is so destructive, so dangerous, that if he succeeds, he's going to overturn the order that Allah created. So now a woman says, it is an act of oppression and injustice that I should be denied the freedom to do anything that a man does. So now you have to find something called I don't know whether you've heard about it in Cape Town. It's called a daycare center. And the baby is just 6 weeks, because that's all the leave you're going to get. And at the ripe old age of 6 weeks, The baby has to be put in the daycare center so mommy can go to work. You're going to have to answer to Allah. On that day when the baby can speak and complain before Allah, ask the baby, come on baby, tell me, you prefer the daycare center or mommy? And the baby will say to Allah, I wanted mommy, but mommy went to work. But Allah gave you a function to perform. He gave you a biological being, He gave you a physiological being. He gave you the capacity to produce food for that baby, the milk, the mother's milk. Men can't do that. He gave you an emotional being. No matter how much a man tries, he cannot have that quality of love for a baby that a woman has. So the baby bonds with mother. That's why mother has a status 3 times higher than her father. So now the daycare center takes over because mommy is a part-time mommy. The last people would be women, the last people to come out to the job. But it's not just an overturned, an upside down world in the relationship between men and women in respect of their functions. It's more than that. And the impact on the economy, and the impact on the home and on the family, and the result of children growing up with an internal rage within them because of neglect that they suffered when growing up. Oh, daddy was busy and mommy was busy, and all that I had to comfort me was the television set. That's all. And then the television took over and brainwashed me. So an internal rage, and they gave expression to that internal rage with acts of violence. Random acts of violence. Have you ever read the stories coming out of American public schools? People are afraid to send their children to school now. Random acts of violence, senseless acts of violence, bullying in school and so on. Because these children are disoriented now. They're unbalanced. They're not normal children anymore. It's more than that. That's not our subject today. Our subject today is the other hadith. That women would be dressed and would yet be naked. That is the sexual revolution. Make no mistake about it. Allah created the woman beautiful. He says in Surah An-Nuh, Wallahu ambatakum. He didn't say Allahu ambata lakum. He says Allahu ambatakum min al-ardi nabata. And Allah has caused you to grow forth from the earth. And Allah has caused you to grow forth from the earth. Like trees and plants. And there are those trees which are ornamental trees. And when you go to Pretoria, you see them lining the streets. When they're in bloom, what's the name of the Jacaranda? Jacaranda? Ah. There are those trees which are ornamental. And there are other trees which are for timber, to make your furniture. And there are other trees which produce food. And there are others which produce fruit for dessert. And there are others which are medicinal. And there are others which give you lovely shade. Like the Lord tree, Sidratul Muntaha. Lovely shade. Better than any umbrella could give you. And so there are different kinds of trees, and so too there are different kinds of human beings. It's called aptitude. And a good teacher can spot the aptitude with which a child has been endowed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so some people are naturally beautiful and handsome. But in the relationship between the male and the female, men direct their attention towards women, and the men find women to be beautiful. And if she is not beautiful and you marry her, Allah will make her beautiful in your eyes. Because there's external beauty and there's internal beauty and so on. Anyhow. So women, when they start to display their beauty in public, that's going to be chaos. That's an invitation to chaos. Because men are going to be aroused. Yeah. And so Allah speaks about the night as وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسٍ, cloth covering. And so women must be covered. Nothing, said the Prophet ﷺ, nothing must be shown of a woman's body except this, and he pointed to the face. If Allah wanted the woman's face to be covered, why would he put a beard on the face of the male? Huh? If Allah wanted a woman's face to be covered, if He wanted it to be covered, if a woman chooses to cover her face, that's her choice, and we respect her choice. But if you go beyond that to say that Allah wanted me to cover my face, and a good woman covers her face, then my question is, well, why did He put the beard on the face of the male? The answer is He put the beard on the face of the male so that you could distinguish by looking at the face and not on any other part of the body. From a distance you could say he's a male, she's a female. That's why. Simple. As women uncover and their body, more and more of the body is displayed, the male becomes excited. And the excitement grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. Until one day it no longer excites. You reach saturation point, which is what Dajjal wants. And when it reaches saturation point, and the woman no longer excites, then Dajjal comes with his trump card that men will dress like women. Why would a man dress like a woman? This is Muhammad ﷺ speaking. Why would a man dress like a woman? Answer: to attract another man. So the sexual revolution, which commences with women taking off their clothes, will culminate with homosexuality and with its sister called lesbianism. Does the Quran deal with homosexuality? Washington could do what they want, but they can't change the Quran. And how does Allah respond to homosexuality? Now, there are many people who are not going to like this part of the lecture. They're in the United States and they're listening in, and they're in France and Europe and so on, and they're listening in, but they're not going to like it because they're comfortable in the United States. And they're comfortable in Britain, and they're comfortable in France, and we don't want to have to make hijrah out of here. Imran, you better change that topic. We are now living in that age when the world is witnessing before our very eyes the Gay and Lesbian Rights Day parade in all the major cities of the world. And they're growing bigger and bigger. Before coming to Cape Town, I was in Sao Paulo, in Brazil. And Sao Paulo boasts of the biggest gay and lesbian rights day parade in the whole of Latin America. Sao Paulo. Not only do you have this overt display of defense of the rights of homosexuals and lesbians, but you also have legal intervention on the part of the state. That men should have the legal right to marry and get a marriage certificate. And women should have the legal right to marry a woman with another woman, a man with another man. In the same way that a couple of a male and a female can adopt a child, so too can two men adopt a child. And that child will grow up in a family of daddy and daddy. I don't know which one of the daddy is going to be a mummy. This is what we're living in today. And every day that passes by, the sexual revolution becomes more and more bizarre. But before we proceed further with this bizarre aspect of the sexual revolution, let us return to the women displaying their bodies. And the natural result, don't be surprised, is something called lust. Something called lust. It has its culmination, said the Prophet ﷺ in another hadith, that people will have sexual intercourse in public like donkeys. Like donkeys. That is the destruction of the male-female relationship. Because when men and women come together in the bond which is based on lust, then it is like a beverage. I don't want to use the word wine. And you have a thirst inside of you. That's the biological need for the sexual relation. You have a thirst inside of you. And this is a beverage. And if you come together in a manner which is halal, one sip and the thirst is quenched. And then you can proceed to other things like studying the Quran, which is a lifetime's work out there to study the Quran. To go outside there in the garden and produce food. So many other things to do outside of the bedroom. So it's beneficial that you take one sip and the thirst is quenched, because that's based on love. But when lust replaces love, then you can drink, and every time you drink, the thirst keeps on growing more and more. No matter how many times you sip, you'll never quench the thirst until one day you reach something called sexual addiction. And the incidence of sexual addiction is growing now. This monster is raising its head in the world. It's like addiction for alcohol. You can't help yourself anymore. The Dajjal is destroying you. When you cannot get satisfaction, sexual satisfaction, with one woman. You try 10, you try 20, you try... What's his name now? Magic Johnson? And he spoke about the 200 women he had. Eventually you seek satisfaction with another man. And when this also does not fulfill your thirst, your thirst is still there, well, then there's the children left. And then the animals left. But the trump card that Dajjal has at the end of the road is to get daddy and his daughter. Daddy and his daughter, which is called incest. And mummy and her son. And brother and sister. And uncle and niece. And auntie and nephew. Truly this is a test and a trial. How do we respond to this sexual revolution when we know where it's heading? Anarchy, the jungle, worse than the jungle, because animals don't behave like that. Allah commands in the Quran, Ku anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Protect yourselves and protect your families from the fire which awaits those who act in this way. The punishment for adultery doesn't come on Judgment Day. The punishment for adultery begins, homosexuality begins in the grave, said the Prophet ﷺ. Allah doesn't wait for Judgment Day. He starts punishing you in the grave for homosexuality. What do? Canada has now enacted legislation making it obligatory for all schools, including private schools, including Islamic schools, to now teach that homosexuality is acceptable alternative sex. They're not going to like me now, the Muslim community of Canada. The Muslims who are comfortably ensconced in Canada, living the good life, driving their BMWs, and they don't want to go back to Pakistan. Who wants to go back to Pakistan? Who wants to go back to Egypt? I mean, this is heaven here in Canada. So don't come, Imran Hussein, to remind us about these uncomfortable things that we have to send our children. What else can we do? We're not sending them to the public schools, we're sending them to an Islamic school. But now the Islamic school by law is required to teach that a man marrying another man is something that is acceptable. So what can we do? We got to do it. We have to send the children to the school. That's the law. My answer to them is located in Surah Al Imran. That the angels are taking people into Jahannam. But the angels pause while taking them into Jahannam to ask them, Fima kuntum? What went wrong? Ask the angels. How come you landed yourself in this mess? And they reply exactly what those parents reply in Canada. Well, what else could we do? Kunna mustada'afina fil ard. There was nothing else we could do. Same answer you got there in Canada. To which the angels then respond and ask, Alam takun ardullahi wasi'ah fatuhajiru fiha. A very uncomfortable verse of the Quran, isn't it? Was Allah's earth not wide that you could have made hijrah to some part of Allah's earth where you could have protected your child from this? Into the hellfire. That answer will not suffice to save you from the punishment of Allah. But Allah did not wait for the grave to punish the people of Lut alayhi salam. The people of Lut alayhi salam were practicing homosexuality. And Allah sent the angels to destroy them. And Lut alayhi salam and his family had to leave during the night. And when morning came, the angels sent down big, huge boulders upon Sodom and Gomorrah and destroyed them, and left that as a sign for all times to come, indicating that when a people turn to homosexuality as publicly as they did in Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, private homosexuality in the closet is a different matter. But when it comes out in the public and you have law, the law of the land is that a man can marry another man, you can't hide and say, I didn't know about that. When you do that publicly, and this is what is now happening around the world, as Gog and Magog engage in fasad, sexual fasad, around the world legislation is coming now. And if you do not submit and have legislation allowing the legalization of homosexuality, guess what's going to happen to your money? They will attack your money. That's what happened in the Venezuelan Bolivar, because Maduro and before him Chavez would not bow to the Zionists. So the Bolivar is being attacked. If Venezuela had used gold and silver coins as money, they would not be vulnerable to that attack. And as the Bolivar, the Venezuelan Bolivar is attacked and it falls in value, the concomitant result is rising prices. It's called inflation. And as an inflation increases and it becomes runaway inflation, guess who are hurt the most? Answer: the poor. And who is the constituency that's supporting Chavez and supporting Maduro? The poor. So it's a very dangerous sword that they're using there to attack those who would not submit. In Zimbabwe, and this has a profound lesson for South Africa, in Zimbabwe they made a deal with Britain some 20 years ago, I think, for Southern Rhodesia to become Zimbabwe, and Salisbury to become Harare. Right. And the deal was that they will have a constitution provided that the white settlers who owned, I don't know how much, 80% or more of the arable land of the country would hold on to their land. And Mugabe signed, and Britain was happy to hand over, give them independence. And for 20 years it continued until the poor of Zimbabwe rose up against Mugabe. Then Mugabe, the great revolutionary, then Mugabe realized this constitutional agreement is not working with Britain. So he had to scrap what was agreed upon with Britain and now seize the land which the whites own and give it to the African people. And then suddenly Mugabe became a very bad man. And guess what happened to the Zimbabwe dollar? Is it called the dollar? the Zimbabwe dollar. Well, I visited Zimbabwe in 2008 for the first time, and my flight arrived earlier than scheduled, and the people who were supposed to receive me were not there. So I said, well, let me make a telephone call and let them know that I'm there. So let me change. I had South African rands. I thought maybe 20 South African rands I could change to make a local telephone call. So I asked, what is the cost of a local telephone call? And they told me 2 million. 2 million Zimbabwe dollars, that's what they told me. So then I went to the South African Airways counter to complain, and they said, come use our phone. Use our phone. So if you refuse to submit and bring legislation to Parliament to permit the marriage of a man with another man, they will attack you and force you to submit. And one of the easiest ways on which they can attack you is by attacking your money that they created, they programmed, and they control. And then you get runaway inflation, and that's it, you're finished. As Maduro is now, Venezuela is now experiencing the world's fastest growing runaway inflation rate in Venezuela. Part of the process to bring down the Venezuelan government. But that is not the most important part of the subject for us. The more important part of the subject for us in our responding to Dajal's sexual revolution is that there is a verse in ثورة الإسراء. Sheikh Ali Mustafa, if I cannot remember it, please help me. In Surah Al-Isra, Allah speaks about وَإِن مِّن قَرْيَةٍ إِلَّا نَحْنُ مُهْلِكُوهَا قَبْلَ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ أَوْ مُعَذِّبُوهَا عَذَابًا شَدِيدًا كَانَ ذَلِكَ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَسْطُورًا. Am I correct?
Yes.
No mistake. Okay. And not a single city will escape, but that we're going to destroy them all before Qiyamah. And those which we do not destroy, we will punish with terrible punishment. Indicating that among the reasons by which Allah destroys you, among them, one of them is homosexuality. Because that's why He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And then He says, I'm leaving this as a sign for all times to come. So as you enact legislation permitting a man to marry another man, the bell is ringing. Another city is going to be destroyed by Allah. If you remain in that city, as they are comfortably ensconced in Canada and in the United States and in Britain and in France and in Europe and in Australia and in Singapore, etc., the gravy train. These countries are called the gravy train. They're the ones who have the hard currency because they got this special chemical. No? So, if you remain in those countries, then when Allah destroys them all, you will also be destroyed. No matter how much dua you make, Allah will destroy you when He destroys them all. Well then, what do we do? The answer is, you cannot change the cities. this is Dajjal and this is Gog and Magog, it is because Hizb ut-Tahrir does not have an eschatology. It is because Hizb ut-Tahrir does not want the Quran and Sunnah, which does not allow them to accept this eschatology, that Dajjal is the mastermind of the sexual revolution, and that Gog and Magog are his foot soldiers through whom he corrupts the people. That they continue living in the cities. Sheikh Imran, we are here in the city so we can continue doing da'wah. Already. Well then, suppose you on board a ship and the ship is sinking. And you can't see the ship is sinking. Because you have eyes and yet cannot see. You have ears and yet cannot hear. You have hearts and yet do not understand. You're just like cattle. The ship is sinking, but you can't see it sinking. Not only is the ship sinking, but no one can prevent it from sinking. Now, this is Akhirul Zaman. What do? They say, well, we gotta have to amass a grand total of 15 million rands to build this beautiful masjid on board the ship. And this is a sign of progress. While the ship is sinking, brother. Yeah. And we have to keep on giving da'wah while the ship is sinking, brother. We who have eschatology, we who have ilmu akhir zaman, and who can recognize the sexual revolution and recognize the feminist revolution as signs from Allah of Dajjal and of Gog and Magog, we say the guidance that comes from the Quran is different. The guidance comes from Suratul Kahf. In Suratul Kahf, it was young men, not old people. Young people. They were the ones, not the elders who were comfortable with their way of life. Innahum fityatun amanu birabbihim wasidnahum huda. When a young man stands up while he's still young and shows a backbone made of steel, Allah increases his guidance, increases his faith. What did they do? When they realized that they could not change their society, but that if they pursued in the effort to change the society, they were going to be targeted. إِذْ يَظْهَرُ عَلَيْكُمْ يَرْجُمُوكُمْ. They're going to target you. What they did was فَأُوا إِلَى الْكَفْ. They withdrew from that society. That is the guidance of the Quran. They withdrew from that society and they fled to the cave. Maybe it was meant to be a temporary stopover in the cave, to sleep for a few hours. So when you wake up, refreshed, you can continue your journey. And Allah put them to sleep. And they slept for 300 years. And Allah said, I've done that لِنَعْلَمَ أَيُّ الْحِزْبَيْنِ أَحْصَى لِمَا لَبِثُوا أَمَدًا. Because there's a profound lesson that He wants to teach us about what happened in the cave. After they had slept for 300 years, remember, first of all, the first response is withdrawal. They woke up and they questioned each other, how long have we been here? So one of them said, maybe a day, or part of a day, which I find strange. Why? Well, what's wrong? Can't you see? If you've been there in the cave for 300 years, then your fingernails will be as long as from Cape Town to Robben Island. So it's easy. Your beard will be very long, your hair will be very long, and so on. So how come they didn't notice that? How can you say a day or a part of a day? Biological time, 300 years of biological time, would result in your fingernails as long as from Cape Town to Robben Island. Oh, I see. They spent 300 years, but they didn't spend those 300 years in biological time. Are there any other worlds of time other than biological time? I wish we had Dr. Ansari now to take over the lecture, my teacher of blessed memory. Are there any other worlds of time beyond biological time? Can we explore? But when you can penetrate beyond the here and the now, when you can realize that there are other worlds beyond the material world, other worlds of space and other worlds of time, you will then be able to penetrate the subject of Dajjal. You will then be able to understand that Dajjal is the mastermind. You can't change the town and the city. So that's why we've given the project of the Muslim village, located in the remote countryside. The Muslim village located in the remote countryside. Get out of the cities and get out of the towns, where men and women can now marry and get a marriage certificate. Get out of the towns and cities where women are dressed and yet naked. Get out of the towns and cities where women are dressed like men and men are dressed like women. Get out of the towns and cities where day by day we're coming to that moment when people will be having sexual intercourse in public. What more do you need to hear? The signs are all there. And when you flee to the countryside, to the remote countryside, do so as a small community, not a big community. A village. And in that village you can have people who are not Muslims. Sure. Provided that you can live with each other with some mutual agreement as to norms of public conduct. And you cannot be hostile to each other. So you cannot be hostile to Islam and expect that we live together in the village. And in that village you produce your own food. And in that village you must make sure you have your own source of water. And in that village you're not dependent on energy from the national grid. Because in the cave they got the energy from sunlight. So natural energy. And in that village you live as a community, a unity. You must have a jama'ah, you must have an amir, and you must have sam'a wa ta'ata. Listen and obey. A sam'a wa ta'ata. Listening and obeying. And in that village you must practice the deen as Allah and His Messenger have given you. And if you do that, يَنْشُرْ لَكُمْ رَبُّكُمْ مِنْ رَحْمَتِهِ وَيُحَيِّي لَكُمْ مِنْ أَمْرِكُمْ مِرْفَقًا. Surah Al-Kahf says, Allah will shower you with His mercy and you'll be able to survive the awesome challenges of Dajjal's sexual revolution. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.